Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Betting Weekly Game Bet Match, your number one tennis betting podcast and YouTube show in association with Bet Rivers, your hometown sportsbook. I'm Sean Calvert. Solo again today as Nigel makes his way back from Dubai. But lots to talk about. Obviously, Indian Wells being our focus, and just touching briefly on what happened yesterday. Obviously, it was very pleasing to get three winners last night at Indian Wells after some of the unfortunate ones that we've started off the week with, because it is tough going at Indian Wells with the changing conditions. It's always tricky anyway because the scheduling is so important here. We're making obviously picks in advance without the schedules being known, as I will do today, but that makes it doubly hard. Just touching on the conditions, that they do seem quicker this year. I've talked about it a couple of times in the previous shows without any real comments from the players, because the big players, the top seeds, the ones that tend to make the quotes, have only just started playing. And I think it is to do with the balls, as I said in the previous shows. The balls, obviously new Dunlop ones this year, replacing the pens, and the warmer temperatures perhaps this year, although the real hot weather is yet to come, by the way. The wind, also a big problem for players. But I think Taylor Fritz summed it up pretty well, the conditions, when he after his match last night. He said, with the new Dunlop balls, it's faster. The new balls are faster, but they also wear out quicker than the others. The balls are ridiculous. I'm hitting a serve on the line and the return comes back. I'm hitting as hard as I can open court and it doesn't even win the point. It's a big difference. It's fast when it's new. What he means by that is it's when the balls are new, and it's slow when it's old. When the balls get old, they obviously get changed after a certain number of games. The 7-9-9 sort of rule. So, as always in Indian Wells, he said it's a big difference between the day and the night. And I think that's the prevailing view that everybody has of Indian Wells. But, of course, our good friend Daniil Medvedev, who always never fails, should I say, to make sort of the alternate comments to everybody else. He said, I prefer playing at night here. I'm not even sure I've lost at night. The finals that I've lost were during the day. It's not that the court is faster at night, but for my game, it feels faster. Today, the conditions were pretty quick, and he played at night, especially for serve and serve plus one. During the day, it's slower, and you get more rallies. That is the complete opposite of what virtually everybody else would say about Indian Wells. So that's what we kind of have to deal with. They don't always take what the players say on face value. It's a peculiar opinion that from Daniil Medvedev. Just touching on the weather, actually, I mentioned it a minute ago. A heat wave is coming to Indian Wells, but not until Thursday. It's actually going to be 100 degrees Fahrenheit plus for at least a week from Thursday onwards. But the matches I'm going to talk about in a minute, they are on Monday, and it's going to be cooler, around 77 Fahrenheit or 25 degrees Celsius, so a fair bit cooler than what's coming. And importantly, the wind doesn't look too strong either, 9-mile-an-hour wind, but the wind is unpredictable. It can come in swirly gusts. So let's get straight onto the matches then for Monday. And the first one I'm going to talk about is Cerundolo against Draper. Francisco Cerundolo, one of my outrights against Jack Draper. Cerundolo plus 175 on the money line with Bet Rivers. Jack Draper's minus 220. The spread is 3.5. I think that says minus 130 for Cerundolo, plus 102, 3.5, plus 102 for Draper. The total's over 22.5, minus 107, and the under 22.5, minus 122. Now, we're on Cerundolo on the outright, as I said. I think he's got a good chance here against the defending champion Draper. I watched his match last night against Benjamin Bonzi, and in typical star Cerundolo, he nearly did make a mess of it. He just edged out the final set tiebreak in the end after one of the worst attempts at serving a match I've seen for some time. Got broke himself to love, really. But Jack Draper's very early into his comeback, from that long-term arm injury that he's had. So we are guessing as to how Draper's body's going to hold up after his three-set match against Bautista. And Cerundolo's beaten Draper in both their prior career head-to-head meetings. On clay, you would expect, but also on indoor hard. You wouldn't expect that, really, but he won that one as well, Cerundolo. And the head-to-head is 102 to 98 in terms of service points won and return points won totals across those two meetings. Draper only winning 44% of second serve points. All right, some of that was on the clay, which, in previous years he's found a struggle, but Cerundolo beating him on indoor hard is quite a coup for Cerundolo. And Cerundolo's got a decent record against lefties generally. He's won 7 of his last 10 against lefties. And in his last 10 main-level matches against left-handers, he's got service points won and return points won, total of 109. So a very strong record against lefties. And that kind of fits with his very solid backhand, really good backhand, which some players struggle with against lefties, particularly single-handers. And he's also won 43% of his career matches against top 10 opponents. Draper's only won 38% of his career matches against top 10 opponents. So his game stands up against the best. We know that. A lot of it is he in the mood with Cerundolo? There were at times yesterday against Bonzi where I thought he could be checking out here, but he didn't. And I think with that under his belt, that would be stand him in good stead. We don't know the scheduling. I would prefer a night match for obvious reasons, a little bit slower. But he beat Bonzi in the first match of the day in the early day conditions. So I think generally Indian Wells is good conditions for Cerundolo. Draper is likely to be kind of up and down as he comes back from that injury that he's had. So I'm going to take a small bet here, half a point on the over 11.5 player games on the side markets on Cerundolo. That's minus 128. Chance with Bet Rivers. I think this is going to be a tight match. Obviously, I hope Cerundolo wins it. Wouldn't put anyone off the money line. He's my pick, obviously, to go as far as possible, as deep as possible in this particular tournament. But on this day, on this this particular bet, half a point over 11.5 player games, minus 128 with Bet Rivers. Now, moving on to the second match that I'm going to talk about today, Novak Djokovic against Aleksandar Kovacevic. And the odds here, minus 1,000 on the money line, Novak Djokovic. Kovacevic plus 600, plus $6 on the money line. The spread here is 4.5 games. Djokovic minus 4.5 games, minus 141. Kovacevic plus 4.5 is plus 108. And the totals, which is interesting here, over 20.5 games, minus 114. And unders, they can't split them. Unders is also the same price, minus 114 with Bet Rivers. Now, I've actually been pretty impressed with Kovacevic so far at Indian Wells. I wouldn't have thought he was a player that would particularly enjoy the conditions here. He grew up playing indoor tennis in New York, so he's not used to the wind. Obviously, he's played in the wind, but he's not as used to it as a lot of players are that grew up playing in windy conditions. And he beat Corentin Moutet in the wind, which is, I must admit, I didn't fancy that. Moutet is a very good wind player, really good mover. Lots of variety, and that's the kind of player you normally want in the wind. But he's gone and beaten him in straight sets in the wind, which is very impressive for me. And also beat Herbert Hurkacz. Herbert, that's Nigel's influence there. Hubert Hurkacz he's also beaten, and now he's taking on obviously a tough one in Novak Djokovic. But the record that Djokovic has in Indian Wells lately, it's really not good at all for a player of his stature. He hasn't actually won a match at Indian Wells in straight sets since 2019 when he beat Bjorn Fritangelo. If anyone remembers him, I think he was from California, Fritangelo. But even in that match, he played an opening set tiebreak. He's gone over the total games line, which is 20.5, in 8 of his last 10 matches at Indian Wells. And he's lost here to the likes of Van der Zandschulp, Luca Nardi, Taro Daniel, Philip Kohlschreiber going back a few years, and Nick Kyrgios, all in his recent appearances at this particular tournament. He hasn't won back-to-back matches here since 2017, Novak Djokovic, and so even the very best players in the world, arguably, for most people's opinion, probably the best player in history has struggled with these ever-changing conditions at Indian Wells. Again, he went 3 sets in his opening match here against Kamil Majchrzak. And Kovacevic has shown that his game does hold up against top 10 players. He's actually won 2 of his last 3 matches against top 10 opponents. They were both the same player. It was Andrei Rublev, but even so, it's get a couple of top 10 wins under your belt in recent times is no mean feat. And he has played well in slow, bouncy conditions in places like Los Cabos, Acapulco. Okay, it's a bit more humid there, quite a lot more humid, but it's still similar bounce, similar slowness to the courts. So he has shown that he can play in these sort of conditions. I don't particularly expect him to win the match, although it wouldn't shock me given where Novak Djokovic is these days. Outside of majors, it wouldn't stun me if he won the match. But I don't think I'd bet it. But the side markets do appeal here. The plus 4.5 games on Kovacevic is one particular wager that a lot of people would be interested in. But I slightly prefer either the over totals or over the player games for Kovacevic. Kovacevic is over 8.5 games is minus 105 with Bet Rivers. In Djokovic's last 10 matches at Indian Wells, the opponent has won over 8.5 games 9 times. And the only one that didn't was the aforementioned Fritangelo, who got 8 games. So a long trend of players either beating Djokovic here or really testing him. Mike Shack, even though he faded away yesterday, he still went over that total, I think, by 1. So I think that's the bet here. 0.5 point again. Kovacevic over 8.5 player games. That is a minus 105 chance of Bet Rivers for my second official player of the day. Now, Indian Wells. In Indian Wells, Betting Weekly have a 5th major. It's called the 5th major, of course, unofficially. 5th major bonus bet. Tennis fans know that Indian Wells is the 5th major, and Bet Rivers is giving bettors a bonus swing for the event. Players in New York or New Jersey can take advantage of our 5th major bonus bet from Betting Weekly. Enter the bonus code BW32 in your Bet Rivers app to receive a $10 bonus bet to use on the Indian Wells BNP Paribas Open. That code again is BW32, and it's available to Bet Rivers bettors in New York and New Jersey. Offer ends on March the 15th. Must be 21. Eligible players only. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. Moving on to the third match that I'm going to talk about today, and this is a really interesting one between two real physical players, Cam Norrie against Alex de Minaur. Cam Norrie's plus 310 underdog on the money line. Alex de Minaur minus 476. The spread is 4.5 games plus 4.5 on Cam Norrie minus 119 with Bet Rivers, and de Minaur minus 4.5 minus 116 with Bet Rivers. The total is the total is 20.5, over 20.5 minus 128, and under 20.5 is minus 108 with Bet Rivers. And that looks just looks a little short to me, that on de Minaur, a tournament that he's rarely played his best tennis at. You would think that the slightly quicker conditions will help de Minaur, the slightly quicker conditions this year that I've talked about. That will probably be a positive for de Minaur, but Norrie absolutely loves it here, and as ever will make this a real physical battle, and probably a long one, knowing Cam Norrie. Most of his matches, very few of them end in straight sets. If you look at the Indian Wells records, it kind of bears that out. Norrie's a former champion here, of course. I think he won it in the year that it was played in October, just after COVID, if memory serves. But he's certainly a champion here. 73% win rate at this tournament, and a service points won and return points won, total of 107. That is pretty impressive. De Minaur, an all right record here, 59% win rate and a total of 103. I feel like he's only made one quarterfinal. I think de Minaur certainly hasn't played his best tennis here over the years, and given the conditions that have been here up until this year, no great surprise. He prefers a quicker, slicker surface than this. Both men, as you would probably expect, winning a lot of return points at this tournament. Norrie winning 45% of return points at Indian Wells. De Minaur 42%, which is kind of de Minaur's average, really, which is very impressive. That's his game, return-oriented. I think de Minaur's record versus left-handers is worth looking into in some detail here, because in his last 9 matches against lefties on clay, he's only won in straight sets twice. I appreciate this isn't clay, but it's clay-like. Some of the players that have won at least a set from de Minaur on clay, some of the lefties, Dominic Kopfer, Ugo Humbert twice, Cam Norrie himself, Alex Molcan, Hugo Gaston, and some guy called Nadal. It isn't clay, obviously, but it does have some very similar characteristics. Even this year, when it's slightly quicker, it's still high bouncing. The balls wear out. It's gritty. And Norrie's beaten de Minaur twice in Australia, in de Minaur's backyard on hard courts. I think both were in United Cup. Off the top of my head, the head-to-head of the 4-match career series, it does favour de Minaur, but not overwhelmingly so. 102.6 to 97.4. It's an okay advantage. It wouldn't make him minus 476, that's for sure. And Norrie, the numbers that stood out to me in that head-to-head is that Norrie's winning 74.4% of his first serve points. I think it tells a bit of a tale about Minaur against lefties in sort of slowish conditions. I think the game that Norrie has, the grinding game that he has in physical conditions, slowish, high bouncing, I think it'll be a challenge for Minaur. He'll probably still win it in the end, Minaur, but I feel like Norrie is not. He's no easy out here. I think this will be a tough match for him. Again, the player total games line is probably the one that appeals most to me here. Over 9.5 games for Norrie is minus 102 chance of Bet Rivers. I think that's the way to go here. I would expect Cam Norrie to put up a real strong fight. It wouldn't actually stun me if Cam Norrie won, but another option is Minaur to win it and over 22.5 games if you want a chunkier prize. I would think Minaur would be delighted to walk off this court in a straight sets win over Cam Norrie at Indian Wells. He'd sign up for that all day long. Just a lean for me on that one, but that's the way that I would head in that particular encounter. Now, the last match that I'm going to talk about is this is one where I think scheduling is very, very important indeed. We don't know the scheduling yet. I think you have to look at that before you really bet this match, but it's an all-Californian clash between Taylor Fritz and Alex Michelsen. We've got Michelsen as the underdog, as you'd expect, plus 205 on the money line. Taylor Fritz a minus 286 favourite with Bet Rivers. The spread is plus 3.5, minus 3.5 games. Plus 3.5 games Michelsen is minus 125, and minus 3.5 games Taylor Fritz is minus 110. The over under the totals, over 22.5 is minus 132 Bet Rivers, and under 22.5 is minus 105. Now, we had a nice winner with Michelsen yesterday against Humbert. So a few of the tight matches went our way yesterday, actually, which they hadn't done earlier in the tournament. So that was quite pleasing. But Michelsen won for us at plus money against Humbert. Now, if this is a night match, which we don't know yet, but if it is, he's not without a chance here for me. Alex Michelsen. Taylor Fritz has talked a lot. He's talked a lot lately this season, actually. He's talked an awful lot this season. But he's talked a lot about how he dislikes the night conditions here. And you can see why. Slower, it blunts his biggest weapons, the serve, the big forehand. They get blunted by the slower conditions at night. And this might well be on late again because, it's an all-American clash. Not only that, it's an all-Californian clash. Which a lot of Americans, a lot of locals will want to see. It wouldn't surprise me if this was on at night, but there's a lot of top players that will play on that day, so we don't know yet. Michelsen beat Fritz in their only career meeting, which was on quickish clay at altitude in Geneva, I believe it was. That's their only career meeting so far, and he won it well. It was 3 sets. I think it was 7-5 in the third or 6-4 in the third. It was a tightish one according to the scoreline, but the statistics, 108-92 in favour of Michelsen in terms of service points won and return points won total. So a good value for that win, Michelsen was. And he won 60% on second serve that day, did Michelsen, against just 43% for Fritz. Now, it's only one match. It was on clay. It was a little while ago, not many years ago, but not relatively recently. But there's other factors as well in this one, and one of them is that Michelsen has been playing very, very well this season. And you could certainly argue that Fritz has been a little bit below par, and a lot of that is to do with these ongoing knee issues that he's got, tendonitis. It kind of flares up. Sometimes it's a problem, sometimes it's not. Little bit of guesswork. I feel like that has held him back this season for sure. And if we look at what they've done this season, 2026 at main level, the stats are pretty similar. The win rates certainly are. Michelsen 62% win rate main level this season, and a service points won and return points won total of 102. Fritz 63% win rate, almost identical, and a slightly better total of 103.6. So not much in it at all, really. And while Fritz does have a very good record here, champion in years gone by, he certainly doesn't like the night matches where it's a lot slower. He couldn't have been any more vocal about that. He's talked about it many, many times, talking about how he has to hit, even if he hits a precise serve on the line, he's not guaranteed to win the point at night, whereas in the day he would be. So massively important, the scheduling here. If it's a night match, I would fancy Michelsen to make it close. Over 22.5 games is one of the appealing options here, or again go with the individual player games. Over 11.5 player games for Michelsen's -120 chance of Bet Rivers. That's probably where I would go in that particular one. It's not an official play, but the reason being because I don't know the scheduling. So those are the 4 matches for today. I'll just do a quick recap of my official plays. The first one was in the match between Cerundolo and Draper, and I'm going to take half a point there on over 11.5 player games for Cerundolo at -128 Bet Rivers. And the second official play, again, half a point in the match between Djokovic and Kovacevic. Half a point on Kovacevic over 8.5 player games at -105 with Bet Rivers. Now, don't forget to hit subscribe if you haven't already, and follow us on socials at Because We Win. Coming up this week, we've got Betting Weekly live Monday to Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern, covering all the Champions League action and much more. Then at 4 p.m, Mike and Doug will be covering all the action stateside. Also for the rest of March, join Dustin and Mitch, the guys on Betting Weekly Tennis live Thursdays and Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again on Tuesday for more Betting Weekly Game Bet Match.